Shinjo Kai is a 17-year-old assassin who moves to another world with a class that hates him. Everyone gets super skills except him, but that doesn't stop him from being one step ahead of the rest of his classmates. In the previous part, the guys surrounded the old man in a trap and even did quite a bit of damage to him, and when they should have been done with him, suddenly Leonora came in and everyone was horrified at the sight of her. When Leonora arrived at the scene of the fight, she noticed that the children had cornered Night Guy. Breathing hard, the old man admitted that old age was taking its toll. Narumi was in the air and didn't know what to do. In that case, Arashur suggested they do what they needed to do, hoping they wouldn't run off with their tails between their legs. One of the students remembered that Leonora could use control magic. Leonora admitted that she can do it, but there are conditions for it. After all, the stronger the opponent, the weaker the effect of her technique. With a smile on her face, she mockingly said that for her, their blessings are nothing more than toys compared to her miraculous power, and she can control all of them at the same time. Arashur called Leonora a coward, thinking that she would definitely lose if she fought fair. This amused the saint, thinking it was a cheap provocation, but so be it, she would give into it and promise to break everyone's claws. Night Guy had expected Leonora might do something like that, but couldn't think she wouldn't use her subjugation magic. Leonora interrupted the old man and said that she was a saint, and since God loves her, she was much stronger than those children. So Arashur went to attack, but the saint used earth magic and stabbed a huge chunk right into the young man's stomach, then used the wind to create a tornado to throw the annoying guy aside. Narumi got there in time and caught Arashur, but Leona had already used fire magic on the other student, burning him to the ground, and then used water magic again to create a water dome for the other student, who started choking and then fell unconscious. Leonora wondered if that was it, but Arashur countered that it wasn't all and she had still won. At that moment, Mito and the other students arrived. He asked Arashur to stop, not knowing what he was thinking when he did this. Arashur countered that he wasn't going to stand idly by like Mito and the others, and if the young man so desired, let him make him stop all this. Mito wondered if the others thought so. Narumi apologized, saying that he could trust those two. Nagasho was in agreement with Narumi. In that case, she even offered to join them now that things had started. But Hashimoto was against it, as not everything is solved by brute force. The saint was disappointed that the split in the group had happened so quickly, but since the riot had already started, they couldn't just split up and pretend like nothing had happened. At that moment, everyone realized that something terrible was about to happen. Then Leonora used the skill Unstoppable Wind, but Narumi couldn't let that happen and used his wind ability, so the two wind streams started to swirl together, and then the wind of the saint absorbed the wind of the latter, so everyone started to fly away, causing them damage. Mito noticed that the other guys were injured, but Arashur told him not to panic as no one died. The young man stated that Mito wouldn't be able to protect everyone, and at this rate, she would put them all down. In that case, Mito prepared his sword, as there was no other option. Nagasho was glad that the young man finally got it, as her patience was already at its limit. Hashimoto was not happy about this event, but it couldn't be helped. The guys surrounded the saint and the old man, and Leonora stated that the guys should remember why she was so valuable. Somewhere in the forest, Kenzaki asked Shinjo what they were going to do now. Shinjo stated that the real fun would begin when this crazy woman used the enslavement technique, but until then, they could leave the dirty work to their classmates. Night Guy admitted that he was of little use at the moment, but he still wanted to speak first. In that case, Leonora used the power of healing, completely healing the old man and even his severed arm. The old man got into a fighting stance, preparing for battle. Narumi was not happy, after all they had put so much effort into crippling the old man. But Nagasho said that they were stronger now that they were fighting together. Leonora, meanwhile, said that this battle would be a great test for them, asking them to start whenever they wanted. But she warned that if they couldn't defeat them, they couldn't become heroes either. Mito rushed forward attacking the old man, but he blocked his attack, until he realized that the young man's sword was starting to cut his sword, so he immediately bounced back. The old man realized that just blocking his attacks wouldn't work. In that case, Leonora used ice to pierce her target, sending shards straight at Mito, but Nagasho melted the shards with her fire. Leonora wondered if the girl could do the same thing again, so she sent ice shards at Mito again, but Mito safely deflected them with his sword, though some of them did damage him. Hashimoto was furious, so she used telekinesis technique, lifting a huge boulder from the ground, while Narumi used wind manipulation wind slash at the same moment, thus attacking at the same time. But unfortunately for the latter, all the attacks failed, as the saint used a protective dome, stating that she was the god's favorite, so sorcery and blessings didn't work on her. All this time Shinjo stood behind the tree, wondering, so is this the saint's blessing? He analyzed Leonora and noticed that her defense stats were pretty low, but she didn't really need them. Shinjo assumed that physical attacks should work, but she was protected from that by this old man. Arashur attacked the knight by kicking him, and the old man thought that Arashur was already exhausted, because his kick was without explosion. Arashur countered that he could defeat the old man without his abilities. Arashur suggested that Mito take care of the saint while she took care of the old man. Mito thought that since his blessings didn't work on her, his sword wouldn't work either. In that case, one of the students threw another sword to Mito, thus arming him with a physical weapon. Leonora was glad that Mito had the resolve to fight. The young man declared that someone had set his mind right, and then declared that he would cut off Leonora's head. Mito lunged forward, but Leonora used magic to hit the target, and Mito was still able to reflect that magic. Nagasha realized that they were no help to him, since the blessing didn't work on the saint, and Arashur was fighting the old man closely, so they were afraid they might hit him too. Hashimoto said that they had no choice, as they would only get in the way. The old man made a side attack with his sword, but Arashur dodged and tried to hit the knight. He dodged, but Arashur hit his leg and the old man lost his balance, so the young man immediately hit the annoying old man in the stomach, from which he fell back. Arashur said that although his wounds had been healed, he was not strong enough. The old man argued that he was the one who could no longer use the blessing. Leonora launched fireballs at Mito. Dodging them, Mito realized that at this rate she would sweat him before he could get close to her. Mito realized that there must be another way to defeat Leonora. The saint stopped and said that she expected nothing less from Mito, as only a few could dodge her techniques so deftly. Mito thought about the fact that until he got closer to her, it would be a game of one-upsmanship. Mito began to wonder what he should do. Try to approach her or find a way to attack from a distance. Considering the blessings don't work on the saint, none of the guys can help. Leonora specializes in ranged attacks, so the young man must shorten the distance between them at all costs. Leonora noticed that something was wrong as Mito rushed towards her with terrifying speed, so she immediately used the wind ability to slow him down, and then the earth ability to dive his feet and stop him. But that wasn't all. Leonora used fire magic and set Mito on fire, which Mito couldn't dodge. Leonora was surprised that the young man had been unknowingly strengthening his body with magic all this time, and then he was able to release all the power at once. Leonora thought it was an incredible talent. However, looking at the poor boy, he was still no match for the saint. Arashur stopped and realized that using the explosion ability would no longer work, but then how could he defeat this old man? In that case, the old man rushed forward, stating that he could see the doubt on Arashi's face, and then gave the young man a severe wound. The young man didn't realize what was wrong with him. After all, he was now losing to some half-dead old man. The old man put his sword down on Arashi's shoulder, saying that without ability, this brat was not capable of anything, calling him an amateur. At this moment, Arashur remembered how in his previous life he fought using only his fists, so he declared that he was strong enough even without his abilities. The old man was surprised that Arashur was still standing on his feet, and then he noticed that the young man's fist was coming towards him, which knocked him to the ground, causing the old man to fall aside. And that's when Arashur finally declared that he had defeated the damn old man. Remembering all of his classmates, Mito stated that this would not do, as he had to protect everyone. Mito stood up, stating about how he didn't want to watch his friends suffer. Leonora was surprised that this young man was so steadfast. Mito rushed forward, and Leonora tried to say that all Mito's efforts were in vain, as he would not be able to get close to her. But at that moment, Mito was already at her side, swung at her and seemed to hurt her, which made the saint flinch back. Leonora was annoyed, for Mito had managed to hurt her. But how? Had she let her guard down? While the saint was pondering, Mito was already behind her, but Leonora used ice magic, causing Mito to have to step aside. It was then that Leonora realized that she was being careful. Mito was just too fast to keep up with him. Leonora declared that God loved Mito, since he had given him the blessing of speed. Mito explained that he had simply asked for a power that would help him protect his loved ones, and then activated the speed technique, thus approaching Leonora, but the latter claimed that it was still not enough, thus using the control technique, causing Mito to fall to the ground. As Leonora used her trump card, Shinjo ordered Kanzaki to take action. Using the technique of controlling Mito, Saint stated that she didn't expect to have to use this technique. By doing so, Mito had fulfilled all her expectations. In that case, she ordered everyone to freeze in place, making it impossible for anyone to move. Leonora stated that they had all done a great job and could be said to have passed the test. But looking at her ward, she could not think that he could lose, but she said that there were no irreplaceable, and there would always be another night. Leonora knew that any problem was solvable when the hero candidates were under her control. In this case, the boys realized that they had no chance of winning from the beginning, because until they found a way to deal with this technique, they wouldn't succeed. Leonora told the students that she was allowed to perform the ritual of summoning the heroes because she could control them. Otherwise, their existence could become a threat to the country. At that moment, blades flew towards the saint, but Leonora covered herself with a piece of earth and the blades fell to the ground. Leonora kept wondering where Shinjo had disappeared to, wondering if it was his fault her servants had died. Shinjo was surprised that a mere lad like him had received the attention of a saint. Leonora said that Shinjo had always seemed strange to her, because even though he had learned useless skills, he had not reacted in any way, suggesting that Shinjo was not an amateur. The saint was disappointed because Shinjo should have thought twice before getting into a fight that was a loss. In that case, Shinjo stated that whether it was a losing fight or not was up to him. At the same time, Leonora ordered Shinjo to try and prove otherwise. She used a control technique to make Shinjo freeze in place. The young man was surprised after feeling the technique on himself. Leonora was glad that the young man finally got it, but before she could say anything, a hole was punched in her shoulder that Shinjo used. The young man was surprised that the saint had covered the vital points, and he expected nothing less from her. Leonora had no way of understanding why this insolent kid could move, after all she had used a control technique on him. Shinjo fired another shot, hitting her hip, and Leonora didn't understand what kind of weapon it was, as her defense didn't keep up with those shots. Shinjo explained that it was the deadliest weapon in his world, but since there wasn't much ammo, he tried not to use it too often. Leonora decided to calm down and use fire magic to fry Shinjo, assuming that the young man had let his guard down. When the fire reached its target, she took a closer look and noticed that only her cloak was on fire. Shinjo stood behind the saint, holding a gun to her head, ordering her not to move. Yunosha assumed that Leonora was weak at close range based on the fight with Mito, and also stated that her strongest technique didn't work on him, which left Leonora stunned, not understanding how it could not work. In fact, the youngster wasn't sure if his gamble would work, but it had worked out just fine. Not too long ago, he had asked Kenzaki to use control on him, which only confused the girl. The young man researched the materials about the techniques, and found something interesting. If two control techniques are applied to the same person, the technique that was applied first takes precedence. Kenzaki wondered, if she used control first, would Leonora's control technique have no effect? The young man suggested that it was possible, but only if Kenzaki's technique was superior to her divine defense. But Kenzaki didn't understand how that was possible since Leonora was stronger than her in every way. In that case, Shinjo assumed that the difference is the level of techniques. Kenzaki's control is at level 1, while Leonora's control technique is at level 3. After all, if you think of Steady's fanatic, you'd think that his technique was higher level, but in fact he just applied the control technique first, so you can assume that it would work for Leonora as well. In any case, they had no choice but to try it out. Finally, Leonora realized that it was all Kenzaki's doing. The young man confirms that it's true, Kenzaki is controlling his body. Stating that this was the end for Saint Leonora, he pointed a gun at her. Leonora, sitting on the ground, noticed the handcuffs that blocked her powers. The young man explained that he had gotten the handcuffs from the cult members, and they seemed to block the saint's powers as well. Leonora wondered what would happen to her now. Shinjo stated that if she could bring them home right now, he would release her. Leonora shook her head and explained that it was not in her power, as she could only summon, and to send her back would require another technique. The young man assessed the saint and realized that she wasn't lying, and there was no such skill in her status. Shins asked why Leonora had told them that if they defeated the Demon King, they could return home. Leonora explained that it took a lot of power to summon, and they even appealed to the god himself so that he could summon here. It could be said that their stay is the will of the god, so if one fulfills their role, it is likely that everyone will return back. Shinjo suggested that Leonora herself didn't know the exact answer, and the saint confirmed it. Leonora said that heroes had been summoned before them, but none of them had even come close to the Demon King. In that case, the young man asked what happened to the heroes before them. Leonora said that many of them were killed by the army of the Demon King, and others who may have survived remained somewhere wandering around the world. He realized that anyone would give up after that, assuming that was why Leonora hadn't told them anything. Leonora said that sooner or later the Demon King's army would attack and they would all have to fight. And if they wanted to survive, they needed the support of the country. Leonora promised to turn a blind eye to the incident, but asked to be released. The young man listened to what Leonora had to say and pulled out his blade and tried to kill the saint, but Mito intervened, asking him to wait. Shinjo didn't understand why Mito was interfering, as he thought he had already crossed the line, but Mito said he had only agreed to help because he believed Leonora could carry them back. But since that's impossible, Mito wants to keep his status as a hero candidate. Shinjo countered that they had already started a riot. But Leonora says Mito is right. She admits that she got a little carried away, but they can imagine that none of this happened. Shinjo realizes that there is logic in the saint's words, but she is too dangerous and there may not be another second time. Shinjo suggested that as soon as they released Leonora, she would try to kill Kenzaki. Mito countered that they wouldn't be able to get away with killing a saint. They would take an oath from Leonora to treat them better and then release her. Hashimoto agreed with Mito. After all, not everyone knows how to fight, and if they become criminals, defeating the Demon King would only be a dream. Nagasho also agreed with Mito, assuming that they would find a way to take the promise from her. But Narumi was on Shinjo's side since he doesn't trust the saint and she might repeat what she did before. Mito agreed with Narumi, but if they killed her, they wouldn't stand a chance at all. Shinjo understood Mito's concern for the entire class, even though he could survive on his own, but still one should not think rashly. So pointing his gun at Leona, he shot her in the head, leaving a bloody hole, after which she fell down. Everyone was shocked by what they saw. Mito was furious, but Shinjo threw the smoke bomb and said goodbye to the others, disappearing into the fog, falling to his knees. Mito didn't understand why Shinjo had done that. Hashimoto was not happy, as Shinjo had killed the saint before they had even come to a mutual decision. Narumi couldn't believe that Shinjo had done that, and Kenzaki was shocked because everything happened so fast. Everything had happened just as Shinjo had said it would. A little earlier, Shinjo had explained what would happen next. Their goal was to find out from Leonora how to return to their world, but if it turned out that she was unable to do so, he would kill her. However, Shinjo assumed that Mito would protect her even if returning to their world wasn't that easy. So at that point, he will kill Leonora and escape. Kenzaki assumed that the young man wanted to take the blame for killing Leonora. Shinjo confirmed that this was the case, as he let some soldiers escape for that very reason. This way, it would be possible to create a vision that he was the one who organized the riot. For this reason, only Shinjo will be considered a criminal, and everyone else will be able to return to the country. But if something goes wrong, Shinjo asked Kenzaki to use control magic to make the negotiations with the country go smoothly. At the castle under the blood moon, the man was surprised by the news of the hero candidates. The subordinate explained that they had made several attempts to eliminate them, but they had all failed. But the man sitting on the throne asked not to worry about it. Ultimately, their actions in enemy territory are limited, and even if they left them alone, they would show themselves sooner or later. This was the Supreme General of the Demon King Army, named Winberg, one of the 4 celestial kings who thought that the war with humanity would prove to be quite easy. Well, Part 7 has come to its end. I hope you enjoyed it and want to see Part 8. And for the 8th part to come out as soon as possible, let's get 1,000 likes and also write a word in the comments. Paladin. That's how I know you've seen the video to the end. That's all for now. See you later and bye bye.